Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. This is Dr. Muhammad Anees, Associate Professor, Department of Microbiology. This is by lecture number 10 about soil microbiology, MIC316, being taught to BS Microbiology. The topic of lecture is role of microorganism in nitrogen cycle in soil. So starting with the lecture outline, I will be talking about, after giving a brief introduction to the topic, I will be talking about the terrestrial nitrogen cycle, then different functions that are taking place, including nitrogen fixation, nitrogen mineralization and immobilization, then nitrification process, then the different important ions, including ammonium and nitrate ions in the soil, and then the important process of denitrification. So finally, I will summarize all the lecture. So starting with the introduction, as you know, nitrogen is one of the most abundant elements on Earth. It is specifically important for life on Earth. Nitrogen is a major gas that makes around 79.1% by volume of atmosphere. After carbon, nitrogen is the major element that is important for life. The different forms of nitrogen that are present in soil include ionic forms, gaseous forms, and organic forms. So if we talk about the ionic forms in this table, you see nitrate, nitrite, and ammonium are three kinds of ions. Among these three, nitrate and ammonium ions are important. Then the gaseous forms, all these material where a small g is written, they are basically gases. For example, nitrogen dioxide, nitric oxide, nitrous oxide, dinitrogen, and ammonia. So these are the gases. And then of course there is the organic nitrogen, which is also part of the cycle. So ammonium and nitrate ions are the plant available forms. Now we talk about the major elements of terrestrial nitrogen cycle. So first of all, nitrogen that is present in the atmosphere that need to be fixed, and this process is called nitrogen fixation. So we will be talking about this process. Then the nitrogen immobilization process, which fix nitrogen from the environment, and nitrogen mineralization that brings it back to available or free form. So these two processes are there, and microorganisms play important role in both processes of mineralization and immobilization. We will talk about these two processes. Then the process of nitrification, which converts ammonium to nitrate ion, and then ammonification process, which converts the organic nitrogen to ammonium or ammonium ion. This process is called ammonification. And along with that, there is denitrification process, which convert the nitrogen back into the dinitrogen form. First, we start with nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is of different types. One is the industrial fixation process, which is also known as Haber-Bosch process. It uses the mineral nitrogen. It uses the atmospheric nitrogen and fixes it by an industrial process, and it is also used in production of nitrogen fertilizers. However, the major contributor in nitrogen fixation is the biological nitrogen fixation, in which the microorganisms are involved, especially bacteria are involved in fixation of atmospheric nitrogen. There are two types of bacteria which are involved in biological nitrogen fixation. One is the symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria. These are the bacteria which make symbiotic relationship with roots. They produce small outgrowths on the roots, which are called nodules. Inside nodules, they live and fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. These bacteria use an important enzyme, that is nitrogenase enzyme, which, for fixation process. And an important thing to mention here is that this process is strictly anaerobic. Then there are free living nitrogen fixing bacteria. They don't need any symbiotic relationship. For example, Azotobacter species and Bijrankia species. And then the cyanobacteria, which are autotrophic and they can fix nitrogen. For nitrogen fixation, they have a specific cells as indicated here by the word H. These cells are called heterocysts. Heterocysts are the cells where there is no autotrophy. These are heterotrophic cells. And secondly, they are anaerobic. They produce anaerobic compartments where nitrogen can be fixed. So you see, microorganisms can manage nitrogen fixation in different ways, either by making nodules or by having heterocysts or some other mechanism. Now we talk about the process of mineralization, immobilization. Mineralization means conversion of nitrogen back into its free or available form, which is mostly ammonium. So why microorganisms do mineralization? Because microorganisms need to obtain energy from the dead organic matter, that is detritus. So microorganisms act on detritus, and then it can liberate nitrogen in the atmosphere by mineralization. So nitrogen mineralization depends on the amount of available nitrogen that is present in detritus. Briefly, if we say if the CN ratio is low, if nitrogen contents are high in the organic matter, I mean if nitrogen contents are high in the detritus, CN ratio will be low. And if the CN ratio is low, the microorganisms will have sufficient nitrogen for mineralization. And the mineralized nitrogen is mostly in ammonium form, and the process is also known as ammonification. This process involves a complex machinery of enzyme depending on the type of substance. For example, if the microorganism is degrading protein, it will be producing a variety of proteases. Then another process is immobilization, which takes place if the CN ratio in detritus is high. If there is more carbon in the detritus as compared to nitrogen, so in that case, microorganism will be scavenging nitrogen from the environment because it will need nitrogen. That need cannot be met by the nitrogen present in detritus. So it will take up nitrogen from the atmosphere, from their surrounding in the soil. So it will basically immobilize nitrogen that is present in the soil. Now we talk about nitrification. Nitrification is the microbial oxidation of a reduced form, that is ammonium, into less reduced form, that is nitrite and then nitrate, and this process is called nitrification. As the process involves reduction, so this process, as the process involves oxidation, so this process is strictly aerobic, and both autotrophic and heterotrophic bacteria can nitrify. The autotrophic nitrification is basically a two-step process. In the first step, ammonia is oxidized to nitrite, and then in the second step, nitrite is oxidized to nitrate. Different types of bacteria have been observed to be involved in this process, include Nitrosomonas, Nitrosococcus, Nitrospira, Nitrosobolus, and Nitrosovibrio, and many more. These are some examples. Then heterotrophic nitrification is done by different types of bacteria by their heterotrophic activity, and in which they basically oxidize ammonia to extract energy. This process of nitrification mainly depends on the concentration of ammonia and presence of oxygen. If the oxygen is low, nitrification is discouraged. And then if ammonia is not provided, nitrification will stop. And secondly, many plants would like to inhibit this process, and there are many plants which produce extracts to inhibit nitrification, because they want to discourage the loss of nitrogen in the form of nitrate ion. So now we have discussed two kinds of available forms, that is ammonium and nitrate ions. These two forms are available to plant. So if we compare the two, ammonium ion is better held in the soil in the cation exchange sites. So there is less chance of loss of ammonium ion as compared to nitrate ion. And it is generally preferred source of nitrogen for plants and microorganisms. In contrast to that, nitrate ion leads to losses of nitrogen from soil. Nitrate leads to leaching losses, which further lead to water pollution. And then nitrate is denitrified, and nitrogen goes back into the atmosphere, so it is another kind of loss. And in all these processes, microorganisms are involved throughout these processes, like ammonification and nitrification. Now finally, we talk about denitrification. It is the conversion of soil nitrate back into atmospheric nitrogen gases, such as nitrogen, nitric oxide, and nitrous oxide. There are a wide variety of denitrifying bacteria that use nitrate as an oxidizing agent in place of oxygen. So we can say that these denaturing bacteria are facultative anaerobes. They prefer oxygen, but if oxygen is not present, they use nitrate as an oxidizing agent. So the process takes place only when oxygen becomes unavailable. Therefore, this process speeds up after heavy rainfall in the soil, because after heavy rainfall, a kind of anaerobic environment is created where denitrification is done. Principally, two genera, Pseudomonas and alkaline genes, are involved in denitrification, but there are some other soil bacteria like Bacillus, Agribacterium, Flavibacterium have also been reported as being source of denitrification. So if we talk about the factors that control the denitrification process, it includes oxygen. So if oxygen is present, denitrification is discouraged. So if the oxygen is absent, then the presence of nitrate and carbon source is very important. Now here there is another important point, that nitrate is produced in the presence of oxygen. So if oxygen is absent, the nitrate production is also a limiting factor. And then if carbon compound is present for which nitrate is needed, that is another important factor. So these three factors actually control this process. Microorganisms have a number of enzymes that they use for this denitrification process. For example, nitrate ion is reduced to nitrite by nitrate reductase enzyme. Then nitrite is reduced to nitric oxide through nitrite reductase, then nitric oxide to nitrous oxide by nitric oxide reductase, and then nitric oxide to nitrous oxide to dinitrogen through nitrous oxide reductase. Now I summarize finally the whole lecture. Nitrogen is a major element after carbon in the universe for life. In soil, nitrogen cycle operates principally by microbial activity. Major amount of nitrogen is fixed from atmosphere by bacterial biological nitrogen fixation. The biological nitrogen fixation is done both by symbiotic and by free living bacteria. So once the nitrogen comes down to soil, then there is a cycle of immobilization and mineralization that is operated by microorganisms. Then the mineralized form of nitrogen in the form of ammonium ion is known as ammonification. This ammonium ion is then nitrified by nitrifying bacteria into nitrate and nitrite. Then the heterotrophic microorganisms can also oxidize ammonium. And finally, the denitrifying bacteria that converts the nitrate ion back into atmospheric gaseous nitrogen. So you see how nitrogen comes to soil, and microorganisms have a role in that. And then there is a process of biomass conversions, and then how ammonium and nitrate have their roles in metabolism of microorganisms. And then finally, through denitrifying bacteria, the nitrogen goes back into the atmosphere. Thank you very much.